Hi guys, I'm AnimeMixer1, AM1 for short, and first of all, excuse that light, I don't have a better place to record right now. Now on Twitter, I was recently made aware of this little tweet by Professor Otaku, greatest American anime critic. And I've seen some of his videos on YouTube, and he does seem to have a few good things to say. I have nothing bad to say about him. However, the tweet by Professor Otaku got my attention because I'm quite fond of Ancient Magus Bride. It might have its issues, sure, but I thought that I didn't quite understand the I will never get past the I purchased a woman to marry her problem of Ancient Magus Bride. I mean, that's what he tweeted, and I felt that why is that so difficult to get over? If you watch the series, you will understand Elias's motivations, and you would also see a very distinct character growth for both Elias and Chise. Now, when this started a discussion and major I can really not speak English today. Major spoiler warning for the Ancient Magus Bride, because that's what I'm gonna be talking about, because I'm gonna be talking about some things that are far out in it. So at first I thought that, I guess I'll give him my view on this, and I gave him this. She put herself up for sale, so to me that morality issue disappears quickly, especially when learning that Elias has little to no idea about the concept of human morality in the first place, though that leads to a whole lot of other plot problems down the line. So I'm trying to just give him my little view on it, that because Elias is a magic being that doesn't really seem to understand humans, much less human morality, it's sort of a non-existent problem to have with a character. If you have any issue, it should be that he has existed so long in the human world and still don't understand human morality, but that's just kind of how it works. He doesn't get that. His brain doesn't compute human morality. And since Chise was so down in the dumps that she actually offered herself up for sale, Elias was pretty much the best choice she could have gotten. Is Elias purchasing Chise very much in the wrong end of the morality spectrum? It is indeed. But taking into consideration the way the character actually behaves and thinks and acts, you would say that, yeah, it's not a good thing to do by human standards, but he's not a human. Let's see how this goes. And indeed, as the series progresses, he gets more and more in touch with what these things are that humans call emotions. It's a weird thing. Now, Professor Otaku answered to my tweet like this. She enslaved herself, so it's okay, it's not a great argument. She still was bought by a dude to be his bride. If that doesn't set off warning bells, that's not my problem. It did set off some warning bells, because when I first started watching it, I thought, okay, that's one way to do it. I mean, I know that they get along later because I watched the OVAs first. I was kind of spoiled that way. If you did not watch the OVAs first, which I highly recommend you do, then I can understand that, okay, this guy is weird, and then you see the skull underneath, and he's all weird, and you're gonna like, what's going on here? Why is he doing that? Certainly, it's a very, very weird thing to behold, even in an anime. Girl put herself up for sale, dude with a skull for a head buys her. And indeed, you can be suspicious of the dude with the skull for a head, I won't blame you. Now at this point I was interested because, hey, I had a conversation going. Conversations about anime are fun, even if you are not in agreement, maybe even more so if you're not in agreement. And so I replied yet again, and told him so on. And as a result, she regained the will to live. While the means were indeed questionable, the ends were much likely better for Chise than if someone else bought her to be a generic slave/sex slave. Which is true. During your time with Elias, they grow close, and they even butt heads sometimes. They grow closer, further, closer. They have a genuine relationship going, but the end result is Chise, who was so down, she was willing to just go ahead, sell herself, and go die with some stranger or something who would abuse her or something. I think that's what she had in mind, honestly. She regains the will to live. She wants to live. She understands her value as a human being. Elias too learns a lot. He understands about those emotions I mentioned earlier. He also gets a bit of an understanding about how Chise feels and what triggers her one way or another, and generally starts wondering, how do humans work? And we do indeed get to know that he indeed bought her in order to observe her. She is an experiment of his in a way. She's a slay beggy, one who can absorb a lot more magic than normal, which is a frail body. They usually don't live long. He was going to try to see if he could prevent her from dying. And of course, he observes her to see what do humans do. And Chise grows from being just an observation experiment and someone he will try to make live just because it's an experiment, to genuinely caring for her. And that's actually a fantastic story. Now, I was happy about just being in a conversation about the subject. I mean, he could have his opinion, I could have mine. I was hoping to convert him. I'm sure he was hoping to convert me too. That's how it works. Maybe I would have seen the other side, maybe he would have seen my side, maybe we would just agree to disagree. Who knows? Instead, later down, because I was also talking with another person, I get to know that he muted me. Now, when he said muted, I wondered, what, has he blocked me or something? But I can see the notification that he replied in the thread that I am involved in, and then I went to his site, I went to his Twitter site, and saw this. Whenever someone's super buttered over an op-ed or other thought on a piece of media, it usually means that you just force them to confront something they hadn't thought of. Smart people reconsider positions, stupid people flip shit. Our response was, what kind of weeb is upset today, XD? And Professor Otaku said, someone who is very much muted now, OWO. Okay, did I say something wrong? Now, honestly, as I said, I was in another conversation within his thread down there, so he probably saw all that, but he never replied to me. I didn't think I had insulted him in any way, shape, or form that he would do something like that, but okay, I guess that's how an informed conversation goes. If you don't like the other person, you just make sure they can't talk to you. I have no personal problem with Professor Otaku. Like I said, seen some of his videos, not what catches my attention that much, but genuinely interesting. I think he's a knowledgeable guy. But he didn't strike me as someone who would do, well, this over a discussion over Twitter. So Professor Otaku, if I insulted you, I sincerely apologize. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to sound butthurt if that was what I did, but I just thought that it was an interesting point to make, that even if you see that Elias's actions buying Chise is genuinely, like, it is wrong, and I agree, it is wrong, but even if you see, but when you see that, but then you can follow the anime and kind of, you don't need to ignore it as such, but you don't need to think it's bad because of it, which is what it seemed like you were saying, that it's a bad thing, like, for the series, like, it makes you dislike the series a bit more. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what it sounded like to me. Now, I did mention another conversation here, and that's with Clara Rose on Twitter, which I checked her out, found her channel, and she does Magic the Gathering, and that's not interesting to me, so no surprise I haven't seen her before, but nevertheless, she seems to be knowledgeable in anime too, so it could have been an interesting one, and they seem to agree. Professor Otaku and Clara seem to agree on that it's a big flaw of the series. With Clara seeing that her BF doesn't understand why she has this big hang-up that she just can't get over. Profs then says that oh, but they really love each other doesn't come into play when there's money changing hands specifically for one party, which is a bit of a stretch, because honestly, I don't think either of them loved each other right from the get-go. I mean, did you think that Chise just went, oh, I'm in love with this guy? No. He was the first person to show any interest for her in her memory. It was just like, oh, he bought me, and he seems to want to keep me. I have no other place to be. Let's stay with this guy. That was her sole purpose for being there. It was not that she liked him, it was that he seems to have an interest in me in some way, shape, or capacity. She didn't care if it was bad or good, there was someone who wanted her in life. Do you realize how desperate and down you have to be to get to that point as a human? If anything, it just says something about how desperate she was for any attention whatsoever. And as we will clearly see in several parts of the series, she doesn't really care for her own safety that much. She is disposable. Not my words, basically she says. And of course these two agree wholeheartedly. Here Clara Rose says, thank you, it's not just me. Here, like, I'm sure it's well told and beautiful and not just falling for your abusive owner. Caps lock on owner, because stating that Elias is the owner is crucial. Technically correct, but we'll get to more on that later. She goes on, but like, this woman is property! Again, all caps. She is a sex slave in all reasonable realities. I do not support that. Now, notice the use of sex slave specifically. That triggered me a bit, because I have an issue with that, because that is nothing at all what Chise is at all. Like I already mentioned, she is a an observation experiment and a practical experiment in order for Elias to try to make her not die due to her frail body. Neither of them have a romantic interest in each other at first, much less a sexual one. Honestly, could Elias do it? I mean, does he have pop up a picture of an eggplant? You get what I mean. So this is where I wrote a small thread of tweets. I just want to shoot in that you just called her specifically a sex slave. I dare you to find any point in the series where they had sexual intercourse, especially with Elias forcing himself on Chise. The closest you got was the bath scene, which was awkward, but adorable. Now, there are limits to what you can fit into 280 characters, so what I didn't say was that sure, invasion of private space, but again, Elias doesn't have a clear mind of the concept of human emotions and morals. Private space is probably not something he is aware of even exists. And if someone told him, he probably doesn't really understand it yet. I go on, yes, she is a slave, in a sense, having been bought, but as a slave, but as a slave, she sure, why can I not speak? But as a slave, she sure does, do we need a blooper? I can't even say, can we get a blooper reel on this? Blah. But as a slave, she sure does have a lot of freedom, and her buyer does his best to understand her and her needs, which is a tall order for Elias, given that he doesn't understand these things, as I mentioned. And let's not forget one thing, she put herself up for sale. She sold herself. Things would have been different if someone else had captured her against her will and sold her to the highest bidder, but she was so down in her life that she willingly gave herself up for slavery, thinking it was for the best. If anything, Elias saved her from being a sex slave. Basically, I'm saying here that if Elias hadn't gotten her, she probably would have ended up as a sex slave, but Elias got her, so she's not a sex slave, because they never, ever have sex. And I just felt like calling it sex slave, that was the one thing that I felt like that was just so factually wrong, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Now here's what Clara replied with. And I did say that was in all reasonable realities. We don't see all of their time together on screen. Scream? It's scream. Why am I so bad at talking today? I usually am much better. She is his property. It's not unreasonable to assume a few things about what was likely to happen given the circumstances. First of all, in all reasonable realities, this being the most reasonable one, I believe, there is no sex between those two. Elias clearly has no sexual attraction to Chise. It's plain as day. You can't just say that, oh, we don't see what happens off screen and go, oh, that they might be doing it off screen, because I'm pretty sure they're not. That would have been a pretty major thing for Chise to undergo. And we might as well add in that, oh, whenever he does it, he uses magic to wipe her memory, and that's that. But again, that's just shoehorning in things that you think should be there or want to be there, or I don't even know why you would want to think this in there. If this is a reasonable reality, then it's reasonable to believe that they do not have sex, especially not the forced kind with Elia as taking Chise against her will. It doesn't happen. Now you're right about that she is his property, but then you're saying that it's not unreasonable to assume a few things about what was highly likely to happen given the circumstances. So, man buys girl, sex must ensue, it is the law. Got it. Now obviously in real life this does happen. Slavery is a terrible thing, many girls are subjected to forced rape and just have to endure, and many get killed during this. It's a very, very sad reality we live in. But this doesn't mean you can just push in this into an anime that does not have it. Oh, man by girl, that automatically means they have rape. I pushed this in there. I pushed this in there. I think that happened. It not happened, but I pushed it in there. I believe it happened, so it's true. There's later on a tweet that says that she didn't continue watching it, so obviously she doesn't know everything that I do. That sounded like I was being a know-it-all. Point is, I watched the entire series, she didn't, because man by girl, bad, not gonna watch, obviously. Now it was with Clara Rose that I had the most heated discussion. I tried to be polite, but something must have come across as rude, because that's probably also why Professor Otaku muted me. So, don't know what I said wrong. I tried to be nice, and she later says that she wanted to be nice and polite too, but that's a later tweet that I'll get to. Now at this point I tweeted back, at this point you're basically telling of what a fanfiction written by you would contain and are ignoring all canon information and observable character traits. I was a bit too straightforward there. The fanfiction thing was meant as a joke, but the rest was obviously a little bit know-it-all-ish. I apologize for that. That was probably the wrong tone to take. Even though I stand by the argument that if you believe that they have sex, like if you believe that, oh, it's very reasonable to believe that they have sex off screen, that is just ignoring the character traits and the canon information, and it's just not something that you can claim without very, very solid proof. To begin with, do you believe Elias has any interest in having sex with Chise? At this point she goes, fanfiction written by you? I just said I don't support the notion of sex slavery. Why the hell would I write that? Which is the point where I go, if you don't like it, why do you have to assume that some people who don't have that kind of relationship have that relationship? It seems kind of counterintuitive. If you really don't like it, I would believe that you would go, oh, but he's not raping her. That's good, at least. You can look at a few other problems. He doesn't understand emotions, like I said. He gets Chise put into a lot of danger, and he is slow to get her out of the danger often, which is one of the bigger criticisms I have of the show. Oftentimes, Elias has the ability to save Chise. He just waits around and sees what happened, which is kind of strange when you want to observe her alive. But nope, she has to just assume that he's raping her, and that's that. Because if I don't remember incorrectly, this anime goes under hentai, like all anime do, and of course they are banging completely nude, obviously. She further writes, ew, I'm sorry it's hard for you to get your head around why a woman isn't fond of the idea of a series where a woman is sold as property. I get a distinct feminism vibe here. Jokes aside, so this is about you being a woman who just doesn't like seeing a fictional series telling of the story of a woman who is sold. Okay, I guess that's something that may be near and dear to your heart, I don't know. But again, she put herself up for sale, so that was her giving up herself as property. If anything, her being sold as property is her own fault, not Elias's. Another criticism I could have with the show is that it doesn't take that long between Chise saying she will sell herself until she's sold, and somehow Elias just happens to be there and buys her at that time. Somehow he knows. How? I don't know. Let's Deus Ex Machina him in there and just see what happens. That's another criticism I could have agreed to. It's not a perfect show. No show is, but there are things you can criticize and it's reasonable, and there are things you can criticize, but it's totally ludicrous. I tweeted back to this, you're the one suggesting they have sex off screen, so... As for the whole woman being sold thing, again, she put herself up for sale. Of course, real life slavery and human trade is despicable, but the entire premise for why she is sold isn't very realistic to begin with. Because the entire premise of the show is she was a slave biggie, and she has immense magical powers. She sees all these magical beings that no other humans can see. Well, few humans. A few humans can, but most of them not. So when she sees them and are scared of them and all that, she's just a very, very weird girl, and she has had some problems because of that. Again, I advise you to check out the OVA. You get a very detailed look into a part of Chise's past there that might explain why she goes so far. Now, as a continuation of her previous tweet, it seems she wrote, and it's the entire impetus of the story. We're meant to feel sympathetic towards the man who bought her to be his wife. I can't really support that. Not everyone has to like what you like. Now, again, you are free to feel a little bit suspicious about Elias when you first see him, because he is a suspicious character. Well, the skullhead and all. I don't think we're meant to feel sympathetic towards him at first. I think we're meant to just be curious about him. Maybe later feel sympathetic towards him, but he does a lot of stuff where he's not sympathetic at all, and Chise is kind of right to be mad at him at times. And those parts of the show really point out that Elias isn't there to be someone you can like whatever happens. He makes a lot of mistakes when he interacts with Chise, and as such, I think those parts are very interesting parts where you get to see a very, very flawed character, but you get to see him grow. Now I replied back, not everyone has to like what I like, of course not. Which is a fact, people like different things, especially in the anime community. I am prepared to meet very strong arguments for and against an anime, no matter the anime. But even if you don't like the series, it doesn't mean you can claim it's even worse because you imagine them having sex off screen. That's your problem, not the show's problem. And I stand by that. If your problem with the show is that you assume that after buying her, he had sex with her, he raped her, whatever, that is indeed your problem. There is no indication whatsoever that he even has a sexual interest in Chise. At the very end of the show, he actually asks Chise when he sees her in a beautiful dress, "Is this what they call beautiful?" He doesn't even have a sense of what beauty is, much less sexual attraction. To this I get the response, "The show invokes a situation that exists in the real world." Yeah, people are told I already mentioned that, so that's the point, but this is not the real world, this is an anime. She continues, "It is a situation that almost always results in what I described." So because in real life this relationship would likely result in rape, you have to assume that the anime also results in rape after the purchase. This isn't a very big leap. Buying someone as a bride is just an implicitly coded sexual transaction, just a permanent one rather than short term. So you can only buy another human being because you want to have sex with them. Which goes against, again, what is canon, because she was bought to be an experiment, which, yes, that is bad too. That is also very, very morally wrong. He buys her and he uses her as an experiment. Very morally wrong, both indeed. But again, stop assuming that he rapes her. You think I'm freaky for not seeing the problem? You're freaky for assuming they... I can't even... She has a tweet saying, "Are you sure?" I'm assuming that has to do with not everyone has to like what I like and that stuff, and I'm sure that you don't have to like what I like, but please see the fact there is no rape. She continues, "And if I'm allowed to dislike the show, why are you going to such lengths to get me to, what, change my mind about being sympathetic to slave-owning participant in human trafficking? I have a significant hang-up about this show that shouldn't diminish it for you if you like it." She has a point. It shouldn't diminish it for me, because it doesn't. Elias probably doesn't have any idea of what he's doing is wrong, even though it is wrong. Should I be sympathetic to him automatically because of this? No, but hopefully he understands later on that, I bought a human. Maybe I shouldn't do that again. Because he did participate in human trafficking, and he does own a slave now, Chise. But as a slave, like I said earlier, she has a lot of freedom compared to what you would think in your very real-life scenarios that you like to impose onto the show, don't you? I mean, if this was truly as dark and grim as you claim it probably is, then I would assume she would be chained up in some dark, cold basement, and he would only come down there to give her basic food and have her, like, you know. And none of that ever happens. I reply back, "I am going to such lengths because I think you are giving it an unfair criticism that is not applicable to the show by assuming Elias buys Chise to use her like an IRL slaver would likely do, which isn't the case. If you assuming that makes you hate the show, that's your problem." Just repeating that her thinking that is her making her own problem about the show that doesn't exist. So far, I think I'm actually being fairly reasonable here. I'm telling her, you are making a problem. It doesn't exist. To which she replies, "Him buying her at all is the problem. It's a classic women as object type setup, and I can't get behind it or feel any sympathy for it. The sexual implications are just that, implications, but they're likely." Hold on. Are you saying that it's not absolute that they had sex, but it's just very likely that they had sex? I feel a little bit of a step back. But I also feel like she still hasn't given up. They had sex! I know it! Just read between the lines, he bought her, they had sex! Which at this point I think is just being stubborn. Again, yes, him buying her is morally wrong. He is participating in slavery and human trade. But you can watch on and see his motivations and get why Chise actually put herself up for sale in the first place. And when you watch their interactions, them having sex, much less forced sex, is ludicrous. She continues, "If you're this defensive over my opinion about it, perhaps it's because of an internalized realization that a lot of what I and Prof Otaku have said rings true for you as well, and you're questioning your own like of media. That can be scary, but it's okay to question things." Good, you have admitted it's okay to question things. Now question your own decision to absolutely believe that Elias is raping Chise. Because that is what I reacted to, and it is factually wrong. You started with calling her a sex slave, and I just kind of went, and no, they're not having sex. To which you respond that, oh yeah, they probably likely have sex off screen. I am defensive over this because it is factually inaccurate. There's no truth to it. There's no evidence to it. The only thing you have to suggest that they are having sex is your own wild imagination. Again, I can agree, buying her in the first place, wrong, and participating in human trafficking, also wrong. Him having her as an experiment is also very, very wrong. But they do not have sex. Have I said that enough now? I'm probably gonna keep saying it a lot because it's themed down here if you haven't noticed. I just knocked on my table. She continues with even more. If you go through a questioning process like that and still enjoy the media, then that is okay as well. Like I said earlier, I'm sure it's a beautiful show and that the story is well told. That doesn't change my hang-up that prevents me from liking it no matter what. So she's being very reasonable here, saying that I can like things despite that there are things that she doesn't like with it. Now here's where I should have known that she hasn't watched it, because she says, I'm sure it's a beautiful show and that the story is well told. Honestly, my bad for not tying the loose ends here and thinking, oh, she didn't watch it. Well, she might have watched like the first episode and then go, no. Maybe she just watched him buy her and then went, what is this shit, delete? I am also trying to be polite in these tweets, and I reply again, I believe it is a criticism that isn't very applicable to the show, which is why I am coming to its defense. I do not in any way condone IRL slavery, but Mahotsukai isn't real life, and the events that unfold go in a completely different direction than what you suggest. I am sad that you cannot enjoy the show because you are hung up on that detail and having to compare it to IRL slavery, but I guess if anime has to be one-to-one to reality, there will be many anime you won't like, and I guess that's a matter of taste. Now this last part was me going a bit too far, because I guess I was being frustrated that someone genuinely believed Elias raped Chise. People are allowed to dislike that show. One criticism I know about it is that it's slow in the beginning. That's fair criticism, but the plot does go somewhere and it is very worth watching to the end, I believe. So I can get kind of defensive about it, but if I hear something that is this factually wrong, it's just I have to talk about it. But here I went too far. I said that she basically wanted anime to be one-to-one to reality, and obviously probably not. And that, oh, you probably won't like many anime since they're not one-to-one. It was partially meant as a joke, but again, I was frustrated, and that was my bad. Sorry. She goes on, to reiterate, not everyone has to like things you like. I do not like the core concept of the show. I do not like that the male lead is someone who is okay with purchasing another person. I do not like the idea of a non-consensual marriage. Again, it's correct that not everybody has to like what I like. I don't have to like what you like, all that stuff. But the core concept of the show isn't that he buys her. The core concept of the show is them two falling in love. That's it. The one who doesn't know what love is, and the one who hasn't been loved. They try to care for each other and they try to understand one another. That is the core concept. Him buying her is what pulls the plot along in that direction. To this I replied, just to ask, would you feel the same if they were gender swapped, so Chise was a boy and Elias was a woman? Also, non-consensual marriage, they don't marry immediately and Chise chooses to stay with Elias. At worst, she's just surprised that anyone wants to marry her. Now, to expand a bit on that last part, I believe, honestly, that the marriage will not be non-consensual. He says that he has the objective of making her his bride. That is very obvious. But as the show goes on, it's very clear that Elias doesn't want to do anything that saddens or angers Chise. So if one day he wants to marry and she says no, I think he will be confused, but I don't think he will force her to marry him. It's not the character that he is. Now, as for the gender swapping thing, I did genuinely wonder if she would have been okay with it if it was a female buying a male, but I never got a reply. Now, continuing on her previous thread about the non-consensual marriage, the setup is something I can't get behind and it poisons the whole show. I do not want to watch it. There are a wide variety of anime I do like, and missing out on this particular one will not be the end of my anime watching career. Finally, she says, I will not be responding to any further tweets on the subject as I want to spare Professor Otaku the mention. It's at this point that I realize, shit, we've been in his thread all this time. Damn. Probably been spamming him with notifications. He doesn't want to hear this. Oh my god, no. Oh dear, this is embarrassing. I do toss Professor Otaku a quick tweet saying, sorry for making your tweet into a big debate thread between us. Hope it hasn't been too annoying. But again, I find out that he has muted me, so he probably never saw it. If you see this video, Professor Otaku, I'm sorry. I don't intend to make enemies of anyone. I just like to have discussions, like actual discussions, and I just wanted to dispel the blatant lie that Elias is raping Chise. Sorry, Clara Rose, but I'm not giving that one up. Assuming that he's raping her, they're having sex in some way, one way or another. Why would you want to think that? You seem like someone who has seen a lot of anime, and as such I think you would be better informed than this. But going back to the tweet where you say it poisons the show, you say, I do not want to watch it, and missing out on this particular one will not be the end of my anime watching career. So you are now, this is when I caught that, oh, probably stopped very shortly after maybe watched the first episode, maybe two, I don't know, but finished very quickly, I believe. That's what it looks like anyway. I replied to her, and this is my final reply to her, because as I mentioned earlier, she doesn't reply anymore, but I just wanted to get this out. Ah, so you didn't watch through it? I've been talking as if we both watched the whole show. My bad. Then we don't have the same frame of reference, making seeing eye to eye difficult for both. And I understand you wanted to spare Prof for more of this, he must be tired of it. It was after that I wrote the apology. Now at this point, with Professor Otaku not having said anything, I just figured this was on with him, and Clara Rose saying she didn't want to do it anymore. I wondered if I should just tweet her directly, have a tweet like between me and her but I figured, no, this is probably over now. If she hasn't seen it, it's probably no point to it, and I probably wouldn't have brought any of this up if it hadn't been for what I saw down in the thread later, because Professor Otaku, you may not get the notifications, but I do. You muting me does not mean I do not see what you reply in those threads where I am involved. This allowed me to be aware that those two continued a small bit further down. Now, after Professor Otaku says he muted me and says she's doing great, Clara replies, "Aw, thanks, I've been doing my best to keep things civil. Find it kinda neat someone actually agreed with me about this show." And truthfully, she did seem to try her best to keep civil. I was actually the one being the most uncivil. I tried too, but I'm bad at that, apparently. Professor Otaku replies, "You're not alone, don't worry, XD." A little bit of a, let's pat ourselves on the back here. We defeated that other guy, we muted him and we stopped replying, yeah. Because we know we're right, that show is terrible because Elias buys Chise. That's just despicable, bad show, 1 out of 10. And just to make it clear, clearly a joke, clearly just overdoing everything that could be assumed about this conversation, but it does seem like, the general point of it is still there, that it seems like you're just patting yourselves on the back for talking back to me about this and saying what you think. I mean, having a bit of a problem with that he buys her isn't such a biggie, but again, it's Clara's whole "we can assume that he raped her" thing that kind of got to me. And it doesn't get better when Clara Rose writes the final tweet in the thread. "Feels that way with some anime fans. Not liking their favorite show is often all it takes to incur their wrath. Even worse if it's something very popular. They get so defensive. First of all, not my favorite show. Like it. One of my favorites from 2017, though that was actually Recreators. My favorite anime ever is Durarara, but I will still accept criticism of that. Anyway. Even if it's something very popular, from what I've heard, even in the anime community there are many people who haven't watched this. Again, I've talked to people, especially in a podcast I did recently, I'll leave a link in the description, where they said, no, it's just not going anywhere, it was slow, I dropped it. So calling it popular might also be taking it a bit far. Although I don't have any statistics like viewer statistics or anything to back it up, I'm just saying that it sounds like people are kind of about it. Until they've watched it, of course, but that's another thing. But you claim that you incurred my wrath by not liking the show I like? First of all, again, you're factually incorrect. You did not incur my wrath by not liking Mahotsukai no Yome. People can dislike Mahotsukai no Yome all they want. They can say what they want. Maybe they didn't like the characters, maybe they just don't like romance, maybe they just don't get it in a way. Or, as I mentioned earlier, some people say it's just too slow in the beginning. Nothing seems to happen in the beginning and thus people drop it. Stuff like that happens. You yourself said you didn't watch it. Again, I assume you watched at least the first episode to at least see him buying her, but you dropped it for other reasons than it being slow. The way you incurred my wrath, Clara, is because you claimed with no proof, no facts, no whatsoever to back it up, that clearly the reason Elias bought Chise was to rape her. To have her as a sex slave. And I'm sorry, but no. That does not fly. That does not fly at all. In no way, shape, or form. In this day and age where we need to be careful about facts, please keep your facts straight. It doesn't happen. You are assuming things in your imagination. Which, again, to me is weird that you would do because you are clearly very, very much against slavery and the thought of people being forcibly raped and all that. So why the hell would you force that thought into a place where it doesn't exist? Just stop it. Just stop it and you will maybe enjoy it. Of course you won't enjoy it if you think that behind the scenes and between the scenes and whenever we're not watching, Elias is having his big bony thing. Would it be bony? I don't know. Does he even have it? Put up the eggplant again. Yeah, that. Would he have that? I don't know. Honestly, I had no idea how this video would go when I started recording it, and this is how it went. I wanted to talk about this conversation, what I believe is actually wrong, where I went wrong, where you went wrong, where and how things went, and explain myself a little bit more. But I also finally want to say I am sorry if I behaved in a way that made you not like me at all at some point. I may come with a few bad jokes. I'm great at bad jokes. And again, you are allowed to like whatever you do. I just don't want you to get a fact about the anime so horribly wrong. I don't want to risk anybody going out there and saying, yeah, I saw this conversation on Twitter and there's this girl who says that the girl gets bought and they have sex, she's her sex slave or something. Because if somebody tries to watch the anime thinking that, they will either be disappointed or relieved, depending on what they're after. Either way, they will be watching it based on wrong information. You may dislike Mahotsukai no Yoma all you want, I like it, you may not. But don't force your wild imagination to fill in whatever doesn't happen. Now, Professor Otaku and Clara Rose, if you are watching, I don't know if you are, but if you are, you may correct me on anything you think I got wrong. We can engage in a friendly conversation where we respect each other. I have nothing against either of you. I just wanted to tell you that the assumption of sex slave was very, very wrong, and I should have realized, because obviously if you assume that and you haven't watched the show, but I didn't realize, I thought you had watched it, and that was why you were commenting to begin with, because you had knowledge about the whole show and would know that it is not the case that they are like that. To anyone else watching the video, you can also give me your thoughts on Mahotsukai no Yoma in the comments. If you didn't catch my name on Twitter during all these screen grabs, you can find me at AnimeMixer1. The other name there is Håkon Seljeset, which is my real name actually. Haven't bothered to change it. And once more, if I did insult Professor Otaku or Clara Rose in any way, shape or form, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, you can tell me what I said wrong that made you hate me or whatever. I don't like to bear grudges, and I want to clear things up between us. I do hope we can have a discussion about anime again at some point, and maybe not let it get out of hand like that. Again, I realize I was the one who was mostly stepping out of line, and I'm sorry for that. But I was hoping it wasn't bad enough to, you know, hate me or anything. So I hope you watched the video, I hope this cleared up a few things, and I hope we can have another talk about anime again. But until then, remember, I have been AnimeMixer1, and I approve of this video.